Well, good afternoon. As just mentioned, this panel is about dirt. It's a love story. Just a little bit about the anthology. It presents readers with, quote, stories, data, natural musings, and far-flung adventures. We're told that, quote, the muscular essays drag you outdoors, scuff your knuckles, and muddy your feet. They'll get you back in touch with the generous, wordless, irresistible divinity in dirt. So I'm going to just go ahead and introduce people. B.K.Loren. B.K.Loren's novel Theft, this here, won the Mountain and Plains Independent Bookseller Award, the Willa Award, a Dana Award, was a finalist in many others, and is currently in development for film. Catherine Ryan Hyde, author of Pay It Forward, said, "Theft is the best book I've read in as long as I can remember." Loren's collection, Animal, Mineral, Radical, is a recipient of the Colorado Book Award, and most essays therein have generated national awards. Loren attended the Iowa Writers' Workshop on full scholarship, but she feels her work as a ranch hand, locked psych ward assistant, candy factory worker, truck driver, and other blue-collar jobs has shaped her writing as much as any workshop. Julene Bair is the author of The Ogallala Road, a story of love, family, and the fight to keep the Great Plains from running dry. Polished, touching, and engaging. According to Mark Bittman of the New York Times, the memoir is a Booklist Editor's Choice, a finalist for the High Plains Book Award, and winner of the Colorado Authors League Award. Her first book, 1 Degree West, Reflections of a Plains Daughter, won Women Writing the West's Willa Award. A graduate of the Iowa Writers' Workshop and the Iowa Nonfiction Writing Program, Julene grew up on a western Kansas wheat farm, which made her a water lover, because water is rare in western Kansas, and a dirt lover, though dirt is not rare in Kansas. Laura Pritchett loves dirt and grew up on a ranch in northern Colorado where she had plenty of experience gardening it, moving it, digging it, and loving it. But she's also an award-winning, acclaimed author, editor of 7 books, including her newest novel, Red Lightning. Her novel, Stars Go Blue, published in 2014, received starred reviews from Kirkus and Library Journal, the latter calling it, quote, a brilliant novel filled with heartache and humor. She has another novel, The Blue Hour, forthcoming in 2016. Her nonfiction includes great Colorado bear stories and 3 edited anthologies. She holds a PhD from Purdue University, and you can find out more about her on her website. Peter Heller is the author of 2 critically acclaimed best-selling novels, The Dog Stars and The Painter from Knopf. He holds an MFA in Poetry and Fiction from the Iowa Writers' Workshop and is a longtime contributor to NPR and a contributing editor to Outside Magazine, Men's Journal, and National Geographic Adventure. He's an award-winning adventure writer and the author of 4 books of literary nonfiction, including The Whale Warriors, Hell or High Water, Surviving Tibet's Tsangpo River, and Kook, a memoir about surfing. He lives in Denver. Linda Hogan, Chickasaw novelist, essayist, and environmentalist. Linda Hogan was born in Denver, Colorado. Her writing deals with issues such as environment, ecofeminism, and questions of social justice regarding American Indians. Her nonfiction books include Dwellings, A Spiritual History of the Living World, and in the realm of fiction, her titles include Mean Spirit and People of the Whale, a novel. Of her several books of poetry, her most recent is Dark, Sweet, New, and Selected Poems. Linda's received grants and awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Guggenheim Foundation, the Lannan Literary Award, the Mountains and Plains Booksellers Literary Achievement Award, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Native Writers Circle of the Americas, and most recently, a fellowship from the Native Arts and Culture Foundation. She's currently working on a new novel as well as essays about Chickasaw history, mythology, and lifeways, taking a critical look at past studies of the tribal histories. She also has a chapter on traditional ecological traditional indigenous knowledge, and animals in a new book on TEK coming out from Oxford University Press. So please welcome these wonderful writers. So we'll just start.
Well, very first thing I want to do, and it's a great pleasure to do, is to thank our dirt-loving founder of the Dirt Religion, editor, inspiring. She's visionary. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. So I'd like Barb Richardson to stand up, please. Well, it's appropriate that we're sitting here on the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and at least when I'm speaking, because the dirt where I come from was formed pretty much by the Rocky Mountains. And so was the Ogallala Aquifer, the water under that dirt. The Rocky Mountains basically made the Great Plains. So if I'm going to talk about my dirt, I need to begin with the Rocky Mountains and how the winds off of the Rockies blew the soil onto the top of the aquifer that it had already formed. And over the years, animals came and went. I mean, we had megafauna that came and went, and then we had bison that came and went, and we had grass that grew and grass that died, and lots of things that grew and died, and made this incredibly fertile loess soil that we then proceeded as farmers to tear up. And then we proceeded to mine the water out from under it as well. The essay that I wrote for this book was essentially an essay about the dust that floated in the air and landed in various places on our farm. And it was also about, it was basically about topsoil being airborne. That's pretty much what my essay was about. But I do want to read this one short, well, it's just an average paragraph from my essay, which was called Dirt Princess. My grandfather Carlson had traded his Texas dirt for Kansas dirt, sight unseen, then moved his family and found it good. 20 quarters, we said with pride, because 20 times 160 was 3,200 acres, making us big farmers for the times, nothing now. The crops varied, but winter wheat was the baseline. Dad planted it in September, and it sprouted before the end of the month, mechanistic, perfect green stitches in the dirt. The first big growth came in May, and I would lie down in it, my back in one row and my arms and legs growing down the adjoining ones. When the heads formed in early June, their whiskers would hiss and sigh over me. Looking into the vortex of blue overhead, I felt myself expanding. Before long, I had to stand up. Even if I was a mile from the house and no one could see me, I needed to be identified somehow, confirmed. Standing above the earth reoriented me and put me back into what seemed like right relationship with it. The concept of ownership was deeply embedded in me. Our land belonged to us so thoroughly that I never worried or mused that it might be the other way around. I wanted to use that excerpt here because of the concept of ownership that it raises and what our relationship was like to the soil and what I think is the source of the problem or the environmental types of issues that we've stirred up out there in terms of loss of topsoil and the pumping of the water and so on. And that's because we as a people could never ever conceive of the thought that we belong to the land and not the other way around, or that the place made us. We were just very proud of what we made of the place. We couldn't use phrases such as connection to the land. You'd never hear that out of any farmer's mouth that I ever met. You would not hear man of the soil. That was sentimental claptrap. The phrase that you would hear from almost every farming father was the phrase we heard from our farming father, which was, hang on to your land. And the reason he said it, though, was not because of his attachment to it, but because it was the best possible investment there is. It was real estate. It was real, meaning that if we sold the land and we just had cash or stocks as a result, then those cash or stocks, stocks could fall, cash could slip through our fingers. But the land would always be there to turn to to profit from. And that's why he valued it, because it was profitable. So there's always been this tension in me between what was real for me, which was the four elements of living on the plains, the way the sun permeated everything, the beautiful color of the grass that stretched on toward a blue horizon, the air, the airiness of the place, the breathability of the place, the quality of the soil and the water. So those real things, there's always been this tension between that and my father's commandment, which was, in order to do right by our memory and by our history, I needed to learn how to profit, and I needed to continue to profit from that land. And increasingly, the way that we were profiting from it was invasive and abusive. When I think about what my book was really about, one really often doesn't know until after one has written a book what it was really about. But I think my book was about how we destroy what we love and then we want it back. And I think most of us who are writing about nature these days are trying to figure out how we do that. How do we get it back? So.
Thank you. Several years ago, Barbara Richardson, the editor, contacted authors from around the country and asked us to say something about dirt. And I know that everyone leapt up in joy, not because we were being paid or anything like that, but because it was a good cause and we loved dirt and we had something to say about it. And so there's essays by scientists, by farmers, dirt lovers, CSA owners, all kinds of people. So our job today, I think, is just to give you a sense of what this book is about and why we each love dirt. My love with dirt, I think, actually started with a letter I wrote to, I was a child, I wrote to President Reagan, then President Reagan, and I begged him not to put a power line through my family's ranch. And he sent it on, or he didn't, his office sent it on to the Department of Energy, who sent it on to someone, and I eventually got a letter that said, actually, we're rerouting it. And, and I have to say that was maybe the worst thing that ever happened to me, because what I was born out of that is a sense that you can actually do good in the world by writing letters and advocating. And soon after that, I saw that very popular bumper sticker, activism is the rent we do for living on this planet. And from that came a very deep sensibility in me that I was going to spend the rest of my life writing about things I cared about. And I am a native Coloradoan, and I'm in love with this state like you wouldn't believe. It's my love affair. And so I'm usually writing about things either in fiction or non that are a little outside my backyard, of fracking and water use and so on. But this time for this essay, I turned my direction to my own garden and my own stomach. I really looked at myself. So I'm just going to read a paragraph that sets up what my essay is about to give you a sense of it. My essay is called Hostile Takeovers, an Ode to Guts and Gardens. And I'm just going to read a bit. The location is beautiful and the soil stinks. I live below the first buckle of foothills in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, waves of mountains to the west and grasslands in all other directions. The only problem? The dirt is bad as the view is good. Instead of the deep, brown, rich soil that other locations on the planet naturally enjoy, this soil is composed of sand and clay. But even worse, underneath the thin top layer of soil that supports all the glorious grama and bluestem and sage is, well, rock. Rock and more rock and rock. And it's good that the view is so inspirational because it has given me patience during the past 10 years of trying to foster soil that was gardenable. Like many people, I've been busy and harried, but also had a vague but purposeful plan. Building soil would foster vegetables, vegetables would foster good health. And more or less, this all worked in a haphazard way. Despite the weeds, the drip irrigation system that often needed revamping, and the persistent and plentiful deer, I did, in fact, usually end up with a nice crop of veggies. Pumpkins for Halloween, squash enough to last all winter, cucumbers enough for salads, tomatoes to eat and then sun-dry, and of course, enough zucchinis to give unwilling neighbors. But then catastrophe struck. It struck the way that catastrophe often does, with unrelated chaotic events. My catastrophe included a septic tank, a bulldozer, an infected tooth, and antibiotics. From the chaos of that, I learned to sing the songs of praises to microorganisms, both in my garden and my gut. So my essay is about the joys of repopulating both. Thank you. And just one quick other line. So I'm not going to read the science of it all and so on, but while the body and garden are back to normal, I'll never quite be the same. For a mere $20,000, I sometimes joke, I've had a crash course in the deep appreciation of the power of microbes to do their dance of health. I've lost my obliviousness to the ways in which I should nurture both, and I now feel it in my bones. We are from the soil, and we will go back to the soil. And while we are here, we must work to steward both. Thank you. Thanks. And so this is just a beautiful collection of essays with beautiful writers. And my hope is that it really does have something for everyone, and asks us to take another look at what we're doing and if we can do it any better.
Thank you. How fun to hear these essays being read. So I can't describe the glee that happens to a writer when they get an email from someone that says, hey, would you write an essay about dirt? It's like, that never happened to me before. So thanks, Barbara. And the zucchini story, once when I was living in Paonia, I leave my car. Everybody in town leaves their car unlocked. And you probably shouldn't. It's dangerous to do that because you come back to your car and there's like giant zucchini in the back seat. It's like clandestine zucchini giving. Pass it on. Random act of zucchini, kind of. I'm just going to read my response to Barbara's request, which I so appreciate. Thanks for putting this all together. And it's called Dirt House. I know a little bit about dirt. I have a dirt floor in my house. Not kidding. 3 layers of poured mud, cracked out, patched with mud again, so it looks like flagstone, treated with mineral spirits and linseed oil. It has the texture of rough-out leather and looks like a night sky if the night sky were kind of muddy. The bits of chopped straw I mixed in with the mud are flecks of gold like sprays of stars if stars were partially made of old hay. A mud hay universe. Also, the little chest-high wall between the kitchen and the wood stove is made of dirt. It steps down in a flowing cascade, 1, 2, 3 steps like a desert mesa. Dirt bricks that capture and hold the heat from the stove and radiate it back all night. You can't tell. You might think the wall is from 2x6s because it is covered with stucco cream with a touch of pink, like the inside of an old adobe church, but nope, it's real dirt under there. On 2 of the steps are wood decoys of loons, black and white with little muddy red eyes. Yep, eyes like mud. The decoys look like they are swimming over a waterfall. The wall and back of the kitchen and interior walls of the 2-bedroom, the deep windowsills and the outside walls that are 18 inches thick, they're all dirt. And I'm the son of a gun who built them. Why son of a gun? That's such a weird, it must have been because she edited out son of a bitch. No? Was that me? I knew you didn't. After living in this house on and off for many years, I wonder why everyone in Colorado and the whole dry West doesn't live in a dirt house, because a dirt house with windows on the south side never freezes, no matter what. Then skipping ahead, it says, so here's the cool thing about building with this brick machine. This guy showed up with this kind of hopper and press, and we made the dirt bricks right there. We dumped in the dirt from the hill, straight, unadulterated, and the machine kicked out the blocks. The crew and I stacked them in a double wall on the footer right around the door frames, and we set the window bucks on the blocks where they offered the best views, to the south. Hey guys, nudge it over a little to the left. Yes, there's the top of the mountain. Good. And we built the brick walls around the windows, and the house grew up from its origins, and the dirt piled back into where it had settled thousands of years ago to where it belonged. We stuck it over, and put on a shed roof, and the sun streams in the big south windows, and the thick walls and the dirt floor absorb all that heat, and even on the coldest winter nights with no fire, day after day, the house will never get below about 40 degrees. When it's sunny for a few days, the warmth rises, and when you light a fire, it gets extremely cozy. And the cool thing, or warm thing, is that it's a much different kind of heat. It radiates from the floor and the walls. You can carry groceries inside on a bitter night and leave the French doors wide open for a few minutes, and the house will keep radiating warmth from all sides. It is soothing being inside this house. It's all curved windowsills and curved corners because you can do this with stucco, so there aren't many real edges. Also, I read that dirt has pheromones or something that come out of the ground and mix with our endocrine systems and gives us a sense of well-being. In this way, dirt is like potatoes and tobacco and opium. So I'm just skipping to the last little paragraph. I just had a memory from my grad school days in Iowa City. It was early fall. It had rained hard for a few days, and a group of 20 of us met to play touch football. We stood around on the sodden grass and chose sides as it began to drizzle again, and someone yelled, "Let's make it tackle, what the hell?" Holy shit. You went up for a pass and were tackled and slid for 10 feet. You barreled into a runner and grabbed him, and others piled on and churned a brown slop that spattered up into your face, and you collapsed into a gritty wallow. In half an hour, everyone was mud head to toe. Nobody could stop laughing. When we were all numb with cold and shaking, were our lips blue? You couldn't tell. We broke up and walked home, leaving mud footprints on the sidewalk. It was one of the happiest days of my life. Is there some connection to the quiet joy I feel in my house? Some dirt paranormal phenomenon? I don't know. But give me a mud hay universe any day of the week. Give me thick walls of dirt to lean on and a floor that looks like the tail end of a mudslide with constellations of gold stars to walk over.
Thank you. Is this on? Good. So I have many different relationships with dirt, and I'm going to talk about one today, which is tracking. And the reason I want to talk about it is because, and it is what I wrote about, which I'll read about in a minute too, but I think that tracking is very similar to writing because you're looking at these arbitrary scratches on the earth, and you're trying to interpret them, and you're trying to make a story out of them. And so writing is the same thing to me. And with that said, in addition to acknowledging Barbara Richardson, I want to just take a minute and acknowledge everyone out there who takes the time to make these arbitrary scratches into some sort of beauty for yourself or other people. I know that there are a lot of writers out there who don't happen to be up here, and I think you should applaud yourselves, myself. But writers are shy, so they won't applaud. And so I'm going to read this. It's only a page and a half or 2 pages or something. No, it's, yeah, 2 pages. I'm just going to read it because what I wanted to say about dirt, I wrote here in these scratches on this page. All right, it's called Dreaming in Dirt. I wake sometimes having dreamt of dirt. All night long, stories rise up from vast expanses of gritty soil, landscapes that read to me like hieroglyphics, like love notes, like survival tales, like novels. When I look down at my feet, the earth becomes a pop-up book, a 3D world surrounding me with animals I know well and others I've never met personally, but whose stories I read like the tales I loved as a kid, the ones where people walked with wild beasts, rabbits, deer, foxes, mountain lions. And we all shared a language because we do. It's the language of dirt. Every life leaves an imprint. Imagine the earth then, like a fist that holds your actions and the actions of every living thing. When you learn to read dirt, you walk into the forest or across a city. Yes, there are imprints in a city too. And the fisted world opens up like 2 palms, holding a book of the best story ever told, because it is every story ever told, if you know how to read dirt. When I see dirt in my dreams, I know I'm going to have a wild sleep. A scratch in the dirt tells the tale of the survival of some small animal, a mouse, a mole, sometimes even a house cat. And the same scratch tells the tale of a wild hunter that went hungry after working hard for a meal. Even the story of flight imprints in dirt. When a magpie lands and touches the tips of its wings to the soil, where an owl swoops down and leaves 5 parallel arcs that embrace a sharp divot where talons extended and clenched. Sometimes the talons lead to the imprint of small feet that darted out of the night hunter's grasp. The escape looks like commas on a page, like rainfall gone sideways on the earth. Sometimes you can only see a large, almost circle, like a period inside the parentheses of the owl's wings. That's the end of the sentence for the prey, no dashes telling of its escape. Sentences become paragraphs, become novels written in dirt. When I wake from a dream of dirt, I know I need to slow down, to look more carefully as I do when I'm tracking. That's the lesson of dirt. There are lives we step over daily. When we walk in a wild place, we are never alone. Lives cross paths with ours in every moment. Almost every time you hike in Colorado's Front Range, for instance, you're watched by mountain lions or foxes, or you're studied by coyotes, those tricksters who see you, and then you watch them disappear like smoke that sinks into the earth rather than rising into the heavens. You cross paths with animals that walk side by side with you, like some kind of post-Edenic apparitions, reminding you that the only original sin is one of not paying attention, of not listening to the dirt beneath your feet, the signs all around you, the names of the animals fresh on your tongue, their stories waiting to be spoken alongside your own. When you walk, you know we are all woven together in a texture of earth that transcends the boundaries of language. If I walk where my parents walked, they too appear again, not in their own tracks, but in visible signs. The 2 Canada geese they called the couple, the one with a distinctive limp, unnoticeable until you look at his tracks, and the other with the dot on the right side of her bill. The small pond Mom and Dad walked around daily, hand in hand at 75. And the tracks and springtime eggs of the western painted turtle they saved from a busy road and brought here, where it has thrived long after their deaths. It's dirt that holds my parents now, dirt that will hold the ones we have loved and their imprints forever, fossilized bones, mummified shapes, caught in the act of living and dying. It's dirt that will hold you and me. Dirt is everywhere and records everything, retelling your story, perhaps even eons after your death, in sediments pressed into history, pressed into time. There is nothing you do that escapes record. There is nothing that the earth will not record and read back to you and others. Listen, it's ever present. Our lives left in dust, where our stories always remain. And again, I want to thank you all for your stories. Linda?
Okay, thank you. Well, I know that, Barbara, thank you so much for this invitation to write about dirt. And I know I said I didn't have time because I'm always being asked to write essays. I always say I don't have time, and then I always end up doing them, as I did for this book. But instead of reading, because we have so little time, speaking of that dimension, I'm going to add some things to my essay that aren't in here and things that I've been thinking about as I've listened to everybody here. My essay is about living with dirt. It's about living with horses, living on a dirt road that comes off of another dirt road, in a canyon land forest where the dust is always in my house, and if I sweep or vacuum one day, by nighttime it looks like it hasn't been touched. And so there's dirt everywhere in my life, outside in. Are you showing me 5 minutes here? Okay. Oh, okay, I better be fast. I'll talk really fast. So anyway, I lived for the last 6 years in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, when I worked for my tribe. And one of the things that happened while I lived there was that we had this horrific drought. And the earth cracked, the dirt cracked, the earth cracked. And I could not measure or find the end of it. But the thing that I knew was that the trees that were being cut down, the deforestation that was happening, was the real reason for the drought. And the juniper trees, which actually saved the hardwood trees by transpiring, by breathing, and by sending water to them when they need them in the roots and in the leaf system, were considered to be the enemy, and so they were cut down. Because of ignorance, because of the people that lived there knew nothing about forestry. They only knew cattle. So I also had read the book about the Dust Bowl, the really great, wonderful book called The Last Great Something. And how all of the earth of Oklahoma had blown away during the Dust Bowl. And that in the president's office, one man said, wait just a few minutes, because he knew that the dust storm was coming. And then he said, there goes Oklahoma overhead. And it all went into the Atlantic Ocean. So what we had was clay, red clay. And it was very hard to get anything to grow there, very hard to live there. So anyway, I also then had to deal with fracking industry, which came in about that later time in my life, before I left, with benzene in the water and a destroyed environment. Later, I went to be a resident in the Andrews Old Growth Forest, which is a 200-year project, where it was amazing how the earth the lichens fell from the trees. Lichens fell from the trees, and each layer that they fell upon was consuming the lichens and the nitrogen, and then they would fix the nitrogen at the bottom. The tree roots are very small in these places, and they don't go deep like they do in the forests here, where we have pine trees and things that have long roots. So what I watched there was the restoration of forest by forest, of lichens and things falling into the areas, studying microfungi, which I always want to call fungi because it sounds better, and then eventually micro everything. You would be so amazed at all the things that are in the soil, that are under the soil. And I spent all of my time on the ground, looking at the leaves, crawling, thinking about this incredible microorganisms in the earth. So here I am living on a dirt road with horses that my one Mustang loves to run and kick up the dirt, which comes into my house, the dirt from the road, which comes into my house. But then one night, because I garden also, one night I was in one area and outside, and I heard all this noise. So I turned on a flashlight and saw that it was all worms churning the earth. The worms, earthworms, were just making the earth alive. And this is part of my essay, the dust and then the worms, because I spent my life as a child that was, everybody has humor here except for me, I'm sorry. Usually I'm really funny, but I spent my life as a disliked child because I'd be jogging or running or playing with my friends, and I'd see a worm on the sidewalk somewhere, or a worm that wasn't getting enough water, and I'd get it over to a good place where it wouldn't die, it'd dry out. And if it was really dry, I'd even spit on it to make sure it had some fluid. So people actually wrote poems and stories about the girl who liked worms and then made fun of me. But I spent my life as a child saving worms and realizing how significant they are. So recently I had a man helping me at my house, a a senior citizen helper he came to help a senior who needed to move some things, and he lifted a few things outside, and I said, "Oh my God, there's my worms," and I went over and grabbed up the mud and the worms and put them in my garden, and he just acted like I was, should be locked up any minute. So anyway, I wanted to just say how significant our soil is to our survival, that it is our survival. And it carries everything from the bacteria that tree roots call and speak about to one another, to the depths of water, which they move between themselves. We have a life of Earth. We have a terrestrial intelligence, I always call it. But not only the trees communicate with one another, but the bacteria in the earth communicates with itself and with each other. And there is one molecule of moisture between each grain of earth. And so to me, I think of earth as holy earth. Each place has its story. Each place is sacred. Each place in the earth breathes and breathes for us and gives us our life, our sustenance. And we have no choice, really, but to take care of the land so that we have our supply of food, oxygen, and the water, like the Ogallala Aquifer, which in our area was very polluted with benzene and also with cattle fecal matter from the cattle ranching. So it's the important thing, I think, for all of us is to educate ourselves to every aspect of our earth, because it's all we have. And with that, I just say thank you and go on to somebody else.
Thank you. We have a few minutes for questions if anybody would like to ask a question or make a comment. There is somebody back there.
Do you ever have dirt as a character in one of your books or a poem?
Would you repeat it?
Dirt has such a life of its own. Have you ever had dirt as a kind of character in one of your books or considered doing that?
Well, I haven't had dirt per se as a character, but I've always argued that those literary critics who talk about elevating place to the level of character really have it wrong, because what we're doing is talking about our creator, which is above character. Place-based writers know that the place that they're from made them who they are. So that's all I have to say about that.
I think every character is made of dirt because they're humans. I mean, if they're a good character, they should be palpable and they should be living and breathing like us, and we're made of dirt and we're going to go back to it. So, yes.
I would if I thought of it. Thank you. I have a house that's a character. Why not?
I was wondering your opinions on the current state of fracking, especially here in Colorado, now that we're going on the world. And natural gas has the oil in the state and taking dirt to get to it.
I'll answer a bit, but everyone else can chime in. I was thinking about that as I was celebrating this festival, and the footprint to get here, you know, was significant. There was a lot of resources used, and that humans by nature are travelers, and that traveling makes us wiser and more compassionate people. And so I'm a traveler myself. And yet we rely so heavily on fossil fuels for that travel. And so I write a lot about fracking for various magazines and have formed my own opinions, which are that it's a very bad use of water. It injects a lot of very dangerous and untested and undocumented chemicals into the earth, and that there are much better alternatives. But it's hard to get away from that. I mean, it really comes down, I think, to electing the right politicians who put the right policies forward and making what consumer choices we can. But we are, frankly, also dependent, and if we want to come to things like this, we all use fossil fuels. So it's always a difficulty for me because I don't want to stay home and not participate in something like this. But I for one, think Weld County has the highest number of fracking wells in all of North America. It smells out there. I flew over them when they were flooding, when we had the floods a couple years ago, and I could see them, the fracking fluids pouring into the waterways. It was disgusting. And I couldn't quite hear that, but I would.
There was fracking here in Longmont in the Boulder in the 70s, and they didn't have the advanced technology they use now, which is 99.5% or 99.5% basically sand and water, and then the remaining chemicals are that are used with ice cream and stuff like that, and everything is basically petroleum based around us. Everything is petro-based, everything we use, and we need the energy. And a lot of people believe to be independent from bringing in oil from potentially foreign places that are harmful or don't favor us in any regard is not the good idea to do.
There are reasons to frack, I mean, and economic and so on, but I think the larger issue is when are we going to get away from fossil fuels, and that can be done. We have the smarts. We just need to put our oomph into it.
They say we have about 100 years supply.
That doesn't sound like far thinking into the future to me.
Well, one of the other issues with fracking, which is really significant, and this is what I have understood from the men who work there. Well, first of all, there are too many accidents where they actually have explosions, but you don't hear about that. But the amount of gas that's burned off from the fracking area is enough to heat 3 small towns in the time that a short period of time that they're fracking, because they're burning off so much natural gas. So any way that we look at it, we're not actually creating enough oil from fracking to keep our cars running and our airplanes running. So which is why that they're doing Arctic drilling and other kinds of oil exploration. All of it being harmful, from fracturing to drilling to whatever form that they're using, it's all harmful. And the amount of chemicals that are being pumped back into the earth and into the water supply, it causes large amounts of cancer and other diseases. And we had epidemics of illness where I lived, which was a major fracking area. And this is an argument that will not be resolved in any area anytime here, but all we have to think about is that it is fracturing our earth, and that should be enough to consider right there.
Is there some books for her?
All right, I think we have one more question over here, and then we'll wrap things up. Sir, we have one more question over here.
I'd like to shift the conversation, if that's okay. I think what you wrote about dirt just made me fall in love, with dirt. But it made me think also about the other elements. So my question is, if you had to choose another earth, wind, fire, or something I haven't thought of that you would also love to write a paean to, or an essay about, what would you just love to sort of slather over?
Well, I love them all, and they're actually inseparable. I mean, we couldn't have a Earth without them all interacting. But of course, my obsession is water. I love water, especially fresh water. Can't go near a lake without, a clear lake, especially if it's cold, without tearing off my clothes and diving in. So.
Actually, my most recent novel takes the 4 elements, and each section of the book is named after an element: earth, water, air, and fire. But water is my other love. The Poudre River in particular, Kashla Poudre.
All my books are about water. I love being all wet.
I can't choose. I mean, I have no way to answer that, but I'll tell you this: I do Xingyi, and when you do Xingyi, your body turns into 5 different elements, not 4 different elements, and so I enjoy being all of those elements. And I don't think I could write. I don't think I could choose one voice to write from. When my body is them, then they all feel good.
What's the 5th one?
Metal.
Well, I write about water also. I've written solar storms and traveled the ocean from Baja to the Bering Sea following whales. But I think that recently I've been fascinated by wind, and not for wind power, but by wind currents themselves and what they do to the water and the ocean, and how the wind moves in the atmosphere, upper atmosphere, and that it has its own currents and its own life. So I've gotten very, very attached to the idea of wind and its own currents and what its life force is.
I just wanted to mention that everybody has books for sale, and dirt is for sale too. Well, in a certain sense. So please frequent the bookstore.